Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, I think we can do better than that. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Nice, very good. I hope you all had a delicious lunch break. Thank you all for coming back and joining us for our final plenary session of LIYSF 2024. As you can see, the stage is already looking a little different than it normally does. We've got a new sort of session layout awaiting you. So our session title today is Empowering Tomorrow, AI and the Next Generation of Changemakers. This session is going to highlight the transformative power of artificial intelligence and the vital role that young people can play in shaping a future where technology and society thrive together. We will explore the challenges and opportunities that AI presents, emphasizing the importance of ethical considerations, essential skills, and collaborative efforts among nonprofits, tech companies, and governments. The discussion will inspire and equip the audience with insights into how they can actively participate and contribute to the positive change brought about by AI. I'd first like to introduce Simran. Simran Manani is an award-winning chemical engineer, Fulbright scholar, and climate tech entrepreneur driving the net zero transition across the hard-to-abate sectors. Simran is passionate about empowering youth and intersectional voices for a just and equitable climate transition. She runs a diversity network across the UK, the US, and India, as well as serving as a World Economic Forum Global Shaper, One Young World Ambassador, and UN Women Volunteer in championing equal access to education and youth activism. She has been named one of the UK's top 100 women in tech, and Yahoo empowers 100 future leaders for her work at the intersection of diversity, tech, and youth empowerment. Simran is a close and dear friend of the forum, and we are super excited to have her back. Simran was a participant in 2013. She was representing the Malta delegation here at LIYSF and has returned back every single year, whether it be as a staff member, a chief of staff, a judge, and most recently as a specialist lecturer, but in my heart, most dearly as a friend who's coming each year. So I'd like to introduce Simran.
Such a phenomenal introduction, and honestly, it feels like I'm coming back home every year to LIYSF, so thank you so much for having me back. I hope you're all as excited as I am for what's next. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce someone who's not just a leader, but a true change maker in the world of tech. And in true testimony to this year's forum, which is around building science across borders, Vilas Dhar actually reshapes this concept, not just of building tech across geographical borders, but across technical, social, ecological, and political borders. He's really about building with intersectionality in mind to create a better world for all. Vilas Dhar is an inspiring voice of hope and engagement for an AI-enabled, human-centered future. As a philanthropist, technologist, and scholar, Vilas advocates for an equity-based approach to designing products and policies that create a more thriving, sustainable, and equitable world. He currently serves as the president of the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, as an advisor to multiple global institutions, including his recent appointment by Secretary General Antonio Guterres to the UN High-Level Advisory Board on AI, and is also the author of a widely viewed course on the ethics in the age of generative AI, which has been translated into 6 languages and reached over 100,000 learners worldwide. He is a regular contributor to media outlets such as the BBC, the Wall Street Journal, Times Magazine, NBC News, and ABC News, among countless others. I am super excited to introduce the phenomenal Vilas Dhar.
Wonderful.
So, as Noga explained, we have a very exciting forum today. We are conducting what is known as a fireside chat. So imagine the fake fire here. It is absolutely fantastic to have you here, Vilas, all the way from the US. And I hear you also just submitted your PhD last night at about 11:50 something, which is kind of epic to add to your multiple accomplishments already. To start us off, can you share with the room, you're an engineer, a human rights lawyer, a policymaker, a tech builder, and now a philanthropist. What inspired you to actually pursue a career at the intersection of technology and philanthropy? And how has your personal career journey actually shaped your vision for the future?
Simran, you're so kind to ask, and what an easy question to start off with. We'll knock that out and figure out the rest. No, jokes aside, I'm just so delighted to be with you all. I was reflecting on the fact that of all of the ways that we get to engage with the world and speak, the most amazing ones are when I get to be in a room of people who share a sense of curiosity, a sense of hope, a sense of the idea that in the work that you all will do, you will reshape the world. And if there are ways that we can help you do that, that becomes such a joy. So I'm delighted to be here with you all. Thank you. I know it's the last day. I hear you've had an incredible experience already. I hope that this will be a part of it. So thank you all. Simran, you asked me what kind of led to the inspiration to what I do today. And I have to tell you the answer is, I have no idea. What I mean by that is the path that I've taken has been lots of turns, lots of curves, lots of jags. I started my career as a scientist. I was a computer scientist and a biomedical engineer. I spent the early part of my life deeply in research and really trying to figure out how these tools could build amazing products. But Simran, I'll tell you that I think throughout, I also knew that just building things for their own sake wasn't ever going to be my answer. There's nothing wrong with that. There are incredible human innovations that come from scientists who are curious about a problem and commit their whole lives to solving it. For me, the problem was a little bit bigger. It was to understand science and engineering as a tool to create a better world. How could we use these really amazing forms of knowledge to build things that change the way we interact with the world around us, with the natural world, with each other, to find places where we could have better health. We could find more social belonging. We could be inspired by what's possible. So for me, that has taken me down, as I said, a winding path. I went from being an engineer to being a lawyer. I spent some time working with communities around the world, really through the lens of political structures and economic structures and moral structures, but throughout always the idea that technology could actually help us step over some of the problems they faced. And through a kind of a chaotic path, I come now to the work that I do, which I'm happy to share a bit more with you about.
Okay, perfect. I mean, I think this leads me very nicely onto kind of the next question, which is your foundation, the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. You describe yourselves as these group of tech-inspired global change makers, optimists and visionaries, and I'm being very, selective about that language, that, bridge the frontiers of AI and social impact. So I feel like that's really tribute to who you are and the kind of partnerships you're creating. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about, the foundation's work and maybe even, take us a step further and actually share a core memory where you've really seen that transformative power of AI on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with the basics. Who in here knows what a foundation does? Okay, that's a good starting point. So look, I think there's a view of the world and how technology is created that we all probably know. We know there are technology entrepreneurs who go off and build startups. The startups get funded. The startups go on to become public companies, and they build products that many of us touch. It's one story, and we know that it exists, but it's not the only story. For every large tech company whose names we all know and talk about at the dinner table, there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are advancing scientific inquiry for lots of other reasons, for academic curiosity, but also outside of those big companies. Now, I think there's a foundational question that I think all of you should think about as well. I ask myself often, do I want to live in a world where the technologies I use are created for me by 10 or 11 companies that are driven by a particular mindset, a particular ideology, that are often situated in super concentrated areas like Silicon Valley, that don't really look like or feel like or talk like the community that I come from, or the communities that you're all a part of? Now, there's a world in which the view is all of the innovation that humanity is doing is happening in those research labs, in those companies. But I know it's not the case, Simran. That is what is incredible about the work I get to do. So I lead a foundation, and a foundation is a very different kind of entity from a technology company. It's a way to think about how you bring together public capital, sure, like some money, but also new ways of thinking about how we create technologies that make the world a better place. We don't operate for profit. So it means that we often don't have to say, if we have 5 choices in front of us, we'll pick the one that makes us the most money. Instead, we can say, if we have 5 areas of scientific inquiry, we can ask the question, which one leads to the most benefit for humanity? And because of that, it means that we can build an institution that does a few things. The first is we get to work with incredible organizations all across the world that are trying to solve big social challenges, often through a technology-based lens. Think about an organization that's trying to make sure that we have conservation of endangered species, and recognizes that for the last 100 years, the biggest threat has often been either intentional action, like poaching, or unintentional action, like what happens when people build cities and villages that engage and destroy natural habitats. For 100 years, we've solved those problems in analog ways, right? In non-digital ways. Like, we've thought about how we empower communities to be better stewards, or we've thought about government policy changes. But now there's a tech solution. What if, as some of our partners are doing, we could put up a set of trail cameras across a massive landscape? And we could use AI and natural language processing and vision processing to monitor those landscapes in real time, to not just take pictures of animals as they go by, but actually use AI to identify individual animals, to track them through the course of their day, to understand what their behaviors are, to learn more about the basic nature of a species, using AI to observe and, through a vast amount of data, extract what's most valuable. And at the same time, use things like satellite imagery and all kinds of other information sources to better enable conservation. Now, that's one story. I could give you 20 more. But all of these places where people are trying to solve problems that their communities face, and these technologies are giving them incredible new tools to do so. So that's the first part of what we do, is we find those organizations and we support them both with money, but also with technical expertise. We have on our staff data scientists, AI engineers, computer scientists, behavioral user engineers, folks who can go out and partner with these organizations and say, let's build tools that support you in your work. So that's at least a starting point.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. And I love that you're starting to pull out as well the concept of being a scientist goes beyond just, those laboratories or in those typical places where we feel like we can do innovation, right? It's about the community activism, being on the ground, etc. And I think you've touched, I actually loved the example you chose as an environmentalist, of course. But you started to pick up on kind of those community-owned solutions, and I think that really stands out in what you're talking about. Building kind of for our communities, by our communities. Kind of moving into the realm of actually how we build this kind of ethical and equitable AI, can you expand for us a little bit? What are actually those ethical principles that we need to touch upon that guide the use of our kind of future AI to ensure fairness and safety for everyone?
Yeah. One of the things that's funny about this conversation is we often try to overcomplicate things. And if you listen to conversations about AI, and I understand that you've heard from some AI scientists even in this program, you'll see that the public narrative is kind of a few things that I think we all engage with. The first one is maybe the most fun one. It's the Hollywood version. It's AI is going to create robots and science fiction futures. In too many of them, the robots try to take over. I've met a few robots recently. None of them have tried to take over my life. It's not the common narrative, but it's the one that we get pushed most often, right? That's a narrative about power, about how science leads to the creation of new technologies, about maybe how those technologies get out of control. And to be honest with you, Simran, I don't have a ton of patience for it, because I have hope for something totally different. I'm not hopeful about technology ever. I'm hopeful about people. So when we talk about something like ethical AI, and for all of you budding scientists in the room, I think this is a really critical point. I don't think you can take the world of ethics, which is about moral values and choices, and try to say, we're going to make that a science or technology question, that the technology will be ethical. It doesn't mean anything to me. Ethics are a human function. We get to make choices about what's right and wrong. We get to make choices about what's moral and immoral. Now, the place where these two conversations intersect is we as humans are faced with choices about what kind of technologies we want to build, about what kind of scientific explorations we want to do. And when we take that scientific exploration and turn it into a product, we get to make choices about how those products will be used. I don't care about ethical AI. I care about building an ethical society where we're able to use AI in ways that transcend what we're capable of today. So what are the principles that should underscore that? For me, the first is the idea that we can't in any way be confident about these tools unless they're built in ways that represent all of us. It's like saying if you decided that you wanted to make a choice about where you were going to have dinner tonight, and you said, you know what, we're going to pick one person in the room, and that person's going to make the choice for all of us, forever and ever and ever. That person might be the smartest, most kind of like sophisticated palate in the room, but over time, I think we'd quickly realize that we weren't happy with the outcome that one person was picking for all of us. So why is it okay that we think it's okay in science, in engineering, that a few companies and a few leaders can make choices about the tools that we'll all have to use? So let's start with that as the first principle, is representative participatory engagement. It means that every person needs to have a voice in the tools we build. Doesn't mean that every person has to be a scientist or an engineer, but it means that we have to know enough about what's happening that we can build meaningful, robust opinions, right? The scientific process matters, that we can look at what we learn, we can build a hypothesis, we can try to test that hypothesis in our own lives, but we can also do it as a society, and we can pick what wins. That's the starting point. The second is to think about harm and vulnerability. Too often, for the last 20 plus years in particular, as the internet started and then social media started, we started building tools and putting them out to the world, often for profit, without really thinking about how they would impact people. And I think, again, I'm an optimist, I think the vast majority of technologies have generally made human welfare better. But there have been people who have been deeply hurt by these tools too, right? That social media has had really meaningful impacts on mental health for young people, and mental health for old people, and mental health for everyone. Let's be honest, right? Who's responsible for those harms? Who's responsible for designing in ways that limit them? Some people might say the people who are responsible are the ones who built them. And I think that's a good starting point to an answer. If that's really the answer, if you all will be the ones who build the technologies of our future, then my second question is, well, what did we as a society do to equip you to ask the right questions about what the harms might be? In your scientific curriculums, when you're studying in high school or college, who's asking you to consider what the ethical outcomes of your work might be? Are we training professors and research staff to build those curricula? And are we asking you to own it, not because it's one more check-the-box course in your curriculum, but because you realize that it's a core part of what you need to build? So, participatory and representative process, making sure that our engineers, our scientists, our technologists are equipped with ethical principles. And the last part of this, and this is maybe the most important one, is that we all have to care about the outcome. For so long, it's felt like maybe technology is something that's done to us. Somebody else builds it. We maybe make a choice to buy it, to use it, to own it. Sometimes maybe it's being done for us, which is slightly better, right? Like we say, okay, well, all right, at least somebody's asking what I need and building tools for me. But what about a world where technology is built by us? And what I mean by that is one where communities who are facing local problems don't have to go far away to a tech company and say, can you make me a solution? But they say, we have the people in our community that know how. Both the technical skills, the scientific skills, the research skills, but also the capacity to turn those into execution, to actually build products, tools, and services that let us deal with our problems head on. It's not a comprehensive answer, but at least it's a starting place for how we think about ethics.
Oh, I love that. And I feel like I've just been snapping my fingers this whole time.
You're very kind.
I think this actually leads me perfectly on to kind of the next question. You spoke a lot about kind of thinking about who actually builds these products. And if we are the people to build those products, how is our educational systems equipping us to do that, right? So if we think about that, but also think about how do we equip communities to start building those solutions, actually, can you tell us here in the room, kind of, the future technologists, what are those skills and knowledge that you feel are really essential for thriving in a world where AI is increasingly influential? It's not just about being able to use the tool, but it's also a tool for influential, scaled change, whether that's social media or anything else, or even democracy.
Simran, I told Simran. So Simran is somebody, let me just give you a little aside here. Simran is somebody I met not long ago, about a year ago, I think.
Yeah, just October.
Who invited me to this event, who I have just been so impressed to learn about you over the last few days as we prepared for this interview. So I told Simran I was a difficult interviewee, and what I mean by that is I'm going to turn the question right back to you in a minute. Okay. I'm going to ask you, based on your experiences, what you think the answer is. But I'll tell you my answer. The first is, look, AI is in every conversation, and you all know that, right? Like, you can't read a headline without talking about AI. You can't have a scientific conversation without asking how AI will help. And as we've talked about in the media, there's always something about AI. I think AI is a good starting point. I often say it's a bit of a Trojan horse. Now, we have a lot of science students in the room, but I imagine you've also read your classics. How many people are familiar with the story of the Trojan horse? Yeah, a lot of great, well-read crowd. I love it. So what was the Trojan horse? It was essentially, we used something that looked like a great, amazing, horse, novelty, and the people of Troy, opened the gates and let it inside, and then they were able to do something very different. Why do I bring it to this conversation about science? Because at the end of the day, if everybody's so focused on AI, to me, it's the perfect starting point to a conversation where you can bring in the things that you care about in ways that are connected. Let me give you an example. When I think about racial inequity, a conversation that's incredibly politically controversial but is one that's important for us to maintain the soul of our society, ideas of inclusion and responsibility. Well, you might say these are two very different topics. The people who want to talk about AI want to talk about computer science and algorithms and data, and the people who want to talk about racial equity are thinking very powerfully about social movements and equality. Well, there are so many different places where the technology intersects with the social challenge. For example, we have a partner, an incredible partner, who works on issues of racial disparity in a particular policy area, and I'll spare you all the details, but I'm happy to come back to it. And for decades, they've been making the argument very powerfully that this racial disparity exists. Well, just over the last handful of years, they've been able to use these new models for data aggregation and collection, taking analog records that go back to pieces of paper that are sitting in filing cabinets, bring them all into a digital environment, learn machine learning techniques on top of them, and for the first time build really significant, quantitative, coherent data and evidence that demonstrates that this challenge that they've been addressing for decades is not just real, but exactly how pervasive and problematic it is. AI lets them have a more robust conversation about racial equity. And across any number of domains of social challenges that we might care about, political participation and how we influence policy, how we ensure that we get medical care and health care out to the very rural last mile communities across the world, how we think about climate change and how we think about economic opportunity. AI lets us enter those conversations with new tools and data. It's also a lot easier to get a policymaker to sit down to a conversation when you say you want to talk about AI. And if it so happens that you turn that conversation into one about a social challenge, that's even more powerful. There is this moment in time. So let me answer your question. What are the skills? What are the kind of pieces? The first to me is always an easy one. It's curiosity. It's recognizing that this isn't something that is so complex and so far away that you don't have an entry point. Conversations about AI are a perfect example right now because they're everywhere. It means you can start. The second is building a technical skill set, that you can't go to have a conversation about technology and social change without understanding the science of technology. And too often we skip over that. This is an audience that I know you are also deeply committed to this, but whatever your field or discipline is, whether it's physics or chemistry or chemical engineering or psychology or behavioral science or the humanities, building a tactical toolkit that comes from learning that subject, not merely the outcomes, which are what is the subject matter, but also that process of understanding how to do research, of understanding how to operate in academic environments. And then finally, the third is being able to weave that technical competence into your views about the world. I talk to lots of young people who say, I'm an engineer, and when I'm not working, I go off and work on making sure that food banks have all the capacity they need, and I volunteer at a food bank. And my first question is always, you have this incredible knowledge about a technical field. Are there ways that you could integrate that into the things that you care about in the world? Is there a way you can take those two halves of your life and put them together? Now I'll turn it back to you. I'm curious, in a much more tactical way, because I know you're close to it. What are the things that you've learned and seen in the world that let you get there?
Yeah, very good question. And I kind of love how you actually, I think, demonstrated how you flipped the script from AI as a topic, allowing to be, being an introductory way into a larger systems change conversation. You just did that, right? From taking it from what are the AI influential skills you need to be in this kind of world into talking about racial equity and talking about how you integrate AI into volunteering food banks, etc. So love that you did that. I think my answer would be Yeah, I think AI is one of those tools that is widening participation across everyone. You know, the kind of introduction of things like ChatGPT means that it's literally in the hands of like a 10-year-old or a 60-year-old. And what you choose to do with that can actually make your life better on a kind of day-to-day basis. So I think in terms of skills, for me, I think it really is about, as we continue to build these tools, how do we still allow our society to be adaptive, to continue to learn, and essentially to pick up these new tools? And how are we doing that so that it interfaces with those who are still on the fringes of society, right? You know, I think we were talking about like a very well-learned audience, right? They probably heard about ChatGPT and were like experimenting with it, you know, within the same 24 hours. But how do we get it out to people at those food banks who don't necessarily even have the infrastructure? And so for me, I think that skills conversation is one around the learning and the kind of widening of access to participating in these tools, but also how do we support building infrastructure that can get that into the hands of everyday people?
I love that, Simran, and I'll just respond to it by maybe a challenge and a question to you all, and I know we'll come to a Q&A soon. I'd love to hear from you, but here's the thing. We're sitting in a world where we are just at the break of dawn on an AI era. In the last few years, we've seen this massive flowering of large language models, of new models of RAG and other kind of search mechanisms and training mechanisms. But for those of us who have been in the field for 2 decades, right, this is the most promising point in time. Not because we can go online and talk to an LLM and ask it to come up with new songs in the voice of Taylor Swift, something that I have done maybe once or twice, but because we have this moment where we see the possibilities of AI for every part of scientific discovery. I'm not a physicist, but I talk to my physicist friends and they tell me how they're thinking about using AI to come up with new mechanisms and models for how the fundamental quantum mechanical model might be changed, shifted, or adjusted. I talk to my friends who are chemical engineers and they're telling me about how they're doing supply chain optimization inside of factories, but they're also thinking about how we come up with sustainable mechanisms to discover new particles, new elements, all kinds of things. In every domain, the people in this room are stepping into your start of a scientific inquiry, just as we're about to see the most fundamental transformation of the scientific method in well over a century. So I don't think the question is how do we make sure that everybody knows a lot about AI? I think the question is how do we all get to a place where we're willing to ask big, crazy, wild questions, to envision what a transformation of fundamental science looks like when the very tools that we have to do that exploration aren't even things we could have envisioned 20 years ago. These are my questions about AI. I don't really care about how we're going to train the next model or get that iterative, like, let's make sure we change the number of parameters. I want our most creative, our most inspired, our most enthusiastic people thinking about what foundationally science looks like in 50 years and start designing for that. It's big, it's crazy, it's wild, and I will be honest with you, the people that I think are most equipped to do it are people like all of you in this room, who are flexible in your thinking, who are curious and enthusiastic, who are starting your careers in a place where you're not yet fixed into like super homogenous ways of thought. Like you can ask those questions, but what it comes down to is whether you want to, and that's a very different question.
Okay, let's stay on that track of the weird and wild and wacky,
weird and wild,
kind of dreaming up the future we want to see. There is this slightly viral meme going around at the moment where we talk a lot about.
Oh no, okay, all right, good.
We can have one after this actually. No, but it talks a lot about how we're using AI really to automate a lot of like creative processes, from art to creative writing, even conversation, right? But we haven't necessarily been thinking about how it can free up human ingenuity, start doing those tedious things that like we don't want to be doing, from like ironing our suit in the morning to vacuuming, etc. And really make space for more human, deeper conversations, or even like a Renaissance 2.0, if I will. So staying on that kind of weird and wacky, what do you think AI can empower us to do across these realms of climate, healthcare, public health? We just talked about that at lunch. Transformative supply chains. Can you just throw out some of those weirdest and wackiest ideas that you've heard?
I love it. And let's start with the basics. I love that. Let's just walk through it. So the first is, how will AI change our lives in the next 5 years? And we'll add to all of the things I think you all already know, but I think about really basic pieces of the human experience. I grew up, and I was telling someone on this earlier, in a small town in the rural Midwest of America, 2 hours south of Chicago. And I had a lot of chores growing up. It was not my favorite. Mowing the lawn, doing all the things around the house. I recently saw a team of researchers at Stanford that have created something called TidyBot. And there's YouTubes of it, and it's a cool research project. And all it is it's an articulated arm on a little robot base, and essentially you can say to it, put it in any room in the world and say, clean this room up. And it'll start looking around, and it'll make sense of the environment, and it'll say, there are some clothes over there, and probably I should go pick those up, and there's some toys out, and everything else. It's a really compelling 30-second little vignette to watch this robot do this. And I think it's maybe not super surprising to anybody in this room that a robot can do that, right? Okay, 10 years ago, where robotics was, this was unthinkable. 20 years ago, we couldn't have even had the conversation. But I'll ask you to think about just what it means for your daily life if this surge in AI leads to what I think will be a total revolution in consumer robotics, where we are surrounded not by the humanoid robots that do everything, but just made-for-purpose robotic tools that take care of a lot of the things that you do in your day. For me, thinking back to my childhood, getting rid of my chores. If I think about the 4 hours every weekend that I had to mow the lawn and pull weeds and do all the other stuff, and I asked myself a pretty fundamental and human question: what would I have done with that time instead? My mind goes to all kinds of cool places. Let's take that as the bottom tier. The ways that AI will change our lives on a day-to-day basis, give us more time, give us more freedom, give us more energy, give us more capacity to do things we care about. What would we do with that time? How would we design our lives? Let's go one step up. Let's talk about kind of the basic services we need in our lives and how AI might change them. You asked about healthcare, and I think about healthcare a lot. Let's look at it from two angles. One, from those who today have very limited access to healthcare, either because they're in areas where the infrastructure isn't there, or because of socioeconomic reasons they can't access it. The idea of AI-enabled diagnostics that fundamentally change the cost structure of health. Today, one of the big barriers is if you want to go and you want to find out what's wrong with you, to use very kind of pedestrian language, you have to go through a sequence of people who charge lots of money in institutions that are super expensive. Depending on where you're from in the world, that might be a government process, it might be a private sector process. No matter what it is, it's not super great as an experience in most places. What if we could use AI to support and supplement the system of healthcare in a way that massively expands access? So that if you want to go in and you need somebody to look at a scan, or you need somebody to look at a chart and tell you kind of what you should do next, it's not that AI is going to replace a human in that process. But if an AI could support a human doctor or medical professional, could we expand care to many more people? And then let's go to the big picture, the really kind of amazing stuff that's out there. From systems that might totally transform supply chains, well, we mentioned that earlier, I think about things like, today, you certainly know this, one of the most polluting industries in the world is transportation, logistics, and shipping. And if you don't know this, many of the goods that we all use that probably are produced in many of the countries that are represented here and consumed in others, they get produced, they get put on a ship that burns usually the worst possible byproducts of petroleum generation. It's not gasoline, it's not diesel, it's not rocket fuel. They take the sludge that comes out when you distill all of those products and they put it on ships and they burn it in the open ocean. You have to do that because of time and because of the expectations that consumers have. What about a world in which every shipping fleet is run by an autonomous system so that we can cut the costs of the people that are involved, is run on solar, but where AI helps us understand the supply chain so well that instead of saying we have to make sure the good moves as quickly as possible, we can predict demand out a year and say, you know what, it's okay if the shipping takes twice as long. It's on an autonomous solar-powered ship, and it might take a little bit, it might be a little slower, but it's still going to get to where it's needed when it's needed because AI has helped us understand demand.
By the time it's needed, yeah.
It's a whole kind of systems-level approach to understanding the basic structure of our economy and saying, how do we optimize for things more than just profit or more than just making sure I get what I want when I need it? How do we maintain both of those principles but also do it in a way that supports the planet and make sure that we can support kind of a long-term sustainability.
I really, really like that, that we've gone straight through from just thinking about profit, but also starting to bring in that idea of optimization and ultimately sustainability. I think let's take some of those weird and wacky examples and kind of bring it to this room.
Yeah.
Can you kind of share a couple of exciting examples of how young people across the world, we have people here from 82 different countries, right? How are they using AI to address challenges in their own local communities? And maybe even can you share some tips on how our own LIYSFers can actually plug into these spaces or even recreate some of those programs in their own 82 countries?
Oh, I love that question, but Simran, I've got to tell you, I more want to hear from you all because I have a feeling you all are doing some incredible things already. But I'll give you a few examples that I've seen from friends and partners all around the world. We have an amazing partner named Technovation that works around the world to train millions of young women and girls as data scientists and AI engineers. This is a process of doing curriculums with schools, but also outside of them, partnering with tech companies. And 3 young women is part of the Technovation program in Delhi. A few years ago said, hey, how do we use these tools to do something that supports our community? For those who might know and might not know, Delhi is a situation, obviously a city in India that has a very problematic environmental situation. What happens is farmers far away from the city burn their crops at the end of a season, the parts that are left over after you harvest kind of useful wheat and everything else, and it creates massive amounts of smog. And that smog flows across the Indian subcontinent and it ends up enveloping Delhi. In fact, I was there last year in a place where you couldn't even see a few feet in front of your face because of the smog. And these 3 young women said, this is terrible. How do we use AI to do something about it? And without access to supercomputers or Silicon Valley labs or anything else, they sat down and they learned the basics of how you build entire data environments, how you build machine learning algorithms on top of them and predictive analytics. And they built an app that essentially lets you, if you live in Delhi, go on your phone without any knowledge of AI and get a recommendation that says, this is kind of what the weather pattern looks like today. This is what smog will look like. And here are some things that you can do to reduce your own exposure to it. It's an amazing example of how you take these very complex tools and technologies to drive a very simple human function. How do I make sure that I'm protected today when I go out with the best information I need and the best recommendations? There are 1,000 examples like this, ways that young people in communities are looking around and saying, what's a local problem I face and how do I fix it? In another instance, an incredible organization, and we're talking a lot about climate things today, which is interesting to me, and we can talk about other domains, but I'll share this one with you. An organization called I See Change. And what they've done is built an app on your phone that when you live in a city and there's an extreme weather event, it lets you do something very simple. It lets you go out, walk down the street, and capture how it's affecting your neighborhood. Is there a storm drain that should have worked that didn't work and caused flooding on the street? Is there something about the infrastructure of how the local canal system worked that failed? You can take a picture of it, you can annotate it, and it goes into a cloud where they're running on an ongoing basis AI systems that are watching this and optimizing for what we need to fix. Now, young people, citizens across these cities are using these tools, and city governments are watching them as well. And they're getting recommendations out of the system that says, climate change isn't some big abstract crazy thing. In our own city, we know where there are places that we need to go in and triage infrastructure. And we need to go in and the next time we're doing road repaving or fixing drains or doing local climate resiliency work, now we know exactly where to go because people have shown us how they're affected by it. And AI systems are taking all of that data and turning it into a recommendation we can use. So really cool examples, and they're often very simple. They often don't require, a server farm going for 3 months in order to train a new model. They're often about taking things off the shelf, adapting them to your lived experience, and building a solution that works at scale.
Yeah, and I particularly love that last example because it really goes back to your last point, right? Of the AI innovators aren't just these people working in offices far away, right? You're getting the everyday pedestrian to actually be part of that solution, right?
Exactly.
And I mean, that is literally the definition of scale change.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I feel like you've painted this really good picture of, the vision of what an equitable future is that's powered by AI. I'm next going to chuck a slightly maybe harder question at you because you seem like you're thriving with all of these questions. So, right, so if we actually think that this promise exists of a better future, what are actually the obstacles or challenges to like creating that world empowered by AI? You know, how do we build out the the bias in like legacy data sets that have been, you know, often trained on global north data, for example? How do we deal with the increasing compute power needed to train these models in a kind of finite resources world? And we've been touching so much on climate today. You know, how do we prevent the use of AI impinging on democracy? You know, 2024 is the year of democracy. I appreciate these are all some really huge questions, but maybe you can help us see some sense.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I think one of the nice things about the question is you could actually take AI out of the conversation. You'll find that for many areas of scientific inquiry, the same analysis applies. So let's start at the top. You mentioned data. One of the challenges here is that we have a world in which we are trying to build new and amazing technologies on foundations that we've never really explored, understood, and made sure they were actually fair. So let me tell you what I mean. As we all know, AI systems are trained on massive amounts of data. And that data often comes from where it's been collected and who it's been collected by. And that often means that that data isn't really representative of the world we live in. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I actually had an experience last year where I sat on stage with a very famous head of a major tech company. And he was trying to explain what LLMs do. And I think with zero irony or self-reflection, he said something like, you know, LLMs, because they're trained on the products of human language and experience, they represent the totality of the best of humanity. And if you're somebody who follows like the big tech company leaders, and you all know who they are, that doesn't sound so out of like frame with what they say, right? But let's be honest, that's a fundamentally misleading statement. Where did the data come from that trained a lot of LLMs? Well, unfortunately, it mostly came from English-speaking or Western language-speaking individuals who live in countries that have access to compute so that they could go on to these online systems and generate content for the internet. It was generally people who came from at least a certain baseline of socioeconomic and educational perspective. And maybe it is the best of what 1 billion people on the planet who had all these levels of access created. What doesn't it represent? It doesn't represent my own family living in rural India or people across most of the world who aren't a part of Reddit or online systems where they're going in and putting in comments that are creating the data that trains these sets. It doesn't represent people who hold centuries or millennia of cultural wisdom. It doesn't represent all of the things that I think we all innately know happen around our dinner tables. It's mostly trained on the representation of what we decide to put into digital form. There's a problem there if we see these AIs are going to make decisions that affect all of us if they're trained on the kind of limited data set we just talked about. And I can give you 100 more examples like this. The data that we collect is the data that often is commercially useful, that companies collect because they want to make sure their products are more used, more sold, all of these things. I'll give you an example. I spoke recently with the minister of a West African country, and we had this really robust and, to me, quite painful conversation. I said, tell me what kind of access you have to data as a government official. And she looked at me and she said, you know, if you asked me about mining, about resource extraction, about where the deposits of nickel and copper and manganese and all of these things are in my country, I can show you maps going back decades that tell me exactly where these things are. Because companies have come in, they've spent inordinate amounts of money, they've surveyed every piece of it, you know, so that they knew where they could go to make money when they needed to. I can give you a resource map of my own country. I thought that's actually great, right? Like that we know so well. I said, what do you know about where there's surface drinking water for your communities? And she said, we have no data on that. Because no company has ever come in and decided it was in their best benefit to spend a lot of money to collect on where the potable water is. I said, but for every community in this country, like that is probably the most critical thing. They don't care if they live above a copper vein. They care about where they can go for safe drinking water. These are the kinds of examples that demonstrate to us why this idea of representative data is so important. If the only data you have is about the things that somebody else has decided is valuable, it won't reflect what you value and prioritize in your lives. So that's a starting point. It's a little bit of a longer answer, but it's an important one. In order for us to have just, fair, and equitable AI, we need to always ask the question, what's the data that's being used to train these models? How does it reflect all of us, and how does it reflect us in ways that actually allow our interests, our rights, our perspectives to be a part of the final answer? The second is the tools themselves. And we've sort of jumped around on this, but let's come back to it. Like, is there a possibility that these AIs will take over? And I think it's worth acknowledging the reality of the question. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. Is it probable? No, I don't think so. And we can talk about why if you want to in the question and answer. But it goes back to the core idea, who's building this stuff? And if I said to you, hey, there's somebody out there who's set out to build an AI that's going to destroy the world, you might say to me, hey, it might be reasonable that we keep track of that and we keep an eye on it just in case, right? So for me, the question isn't, is AI going to destroy us? It's, what are we going to do as society to build boundaries, safeguards, and guardrails? How are we going to make sure that we're monitoring what's happening in this space? How are we making sure that if things get a little too risky, there's somebody in charge who we trust with both technical competency and because they have the right moral compass to step in and do something about it? And today, Simran, I don't think we have that. If I asked you who in the world is responsible for doing that today, the only real answer that even gets close is, well, maybe we should have the tech companies do that. I'm not sure we should have the tech companies be responsible for making sure that tech companies aren't going to build something that destroys us all. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to say, if we came together as a society and we really were worried about this risk, what would we do about it? How would we come up with a new way to govern these technologies? How would we think about who's responsible? How are they trained and resourced? And that's an opportunity for scientists to come together with policymakers and actually answer the question. The third and last thing here is, no matter what our best intentions are in designing these systems, they're going to have second and third order effects that we can't even begin to really analyze and predict. I'll give you an example. In the 1960s, after World War II, one of the great technical innovations was the washing machine. You might all be looking at me and say, why is he talking about washing machines right now? Washing machines were huge and transformed society. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? I see a few nods. When washing machines came out, everybody had cleaner clothes. That's generally a good thing. I think it probably smelled a little bit better, like all that good stuff. But maybe more importantly, prior to the deployment of the washing machine, the amount of time that the average woman in a Western country spent on domestic chores was well north of 20 hours a week. Within a decade, the advancement of washing machines and associated kind of consumer products took that number down by almost an order of magnitude. It meant that for the first time, you had women who looked around and said, wait, I have all of this time, what am I going to do with it? And the answers were amazing. It changed the very fundamentals of who was taking seats in academic classrooms, of where social and political movements were being led, of who ran for office, of how our decisions were made. It's an example of a technology that transformed a fundamental question about social participation and equality in a way that I think all of us can agree was incredibly powerful and positive. My question will be, we're still talking about AI as if it's about like a chat line on your browser. When it's really deployed at scale and it creates all of these amazing opportunities, what will be the second and third order effects? What will happen to our educational systems, to our political systems, to our financial systems? And how are we going to be ready for that when it happens? Where are we going to build resilience so that when those things change, they change in ways that we actually want them to change, that actually let us feel more empowered and participatory? I don't have an answer to it, but I think we have early signs of hope.
Thank you so much. I feel like I came away with more questions than answers, but maybe the right questions. I'm going to touch on that second point you left us with around the role of kind of scientists and policymakers coming together to actually build these guardrails and kind of global policy. Now, as a kind of leader in AI ethics and policy, you've kind of been in those rooms where those global decisions are being made. You're working with the UN High-Level Advisory Board, for example. What can you kind of tell us about how those negotiations are made, and touching upon your previous points, kind of what voices are absent actually in the AI, tech, and policy-making spaces? And there's this really famous quote that talks about like, if we don't intentionally include, we unintentionally exclude. And so how do we go about changing this? How do we honor that task of actually bringing everyone to the table in these global decision-making rooms?
That's such a powerful framing, Simran. I love that quote. I think it's at the core of so much of the work that we all care about. Let's put it this way. There's been a historical progression here. And it started with the folks who knew the technology, coming out and sharing it with all of us, right? And I've been an engineer for much of my life. Like, those of us who were in the AI space for 2 decades saw this moment in time when ChatGPT was released, right? And it was, November of 2021. It was this incredible moment. And for a period of time, the only voices we really heard about it were the technologists themselves. I think, unfortunately, across the world today, that still is the dynamic, that technologists, and not even all technologists, but a very small number of them, are the primary voices. I think the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, had a real visionary approach to this when he said, AI is a technology, but it's also a way for us to really think about how we work together in the 21st century. And he appointed this high-level advisory board, which you've mentioned a few times, and we've just come to the end of a 1-year deliberation that's resulted in a final report, and it makes some recommendations about international governance. I'll tell you a little bit about that. But let me answer your question of composition. I think what was really quite brilliant about how he designed this panel is that it has technologists, but it has policymakers. It has philosophers, it has artists, it has communicators, it has representatives of indigenous communities and representatives of every country and every continent in kind of regional ways. It became a place where we could have a conversation about science grounded in human experience. And the products of it, which I have to think about what's public and what's not, Simran, but I think I can speak to it generally, were a few things that I think will appeal to everybody in the room. Mm-hmm. The first was, we can't have a conversation about AI without a deep scientific grounding. We need the people who actually understand not just where these tools came from and how we built them, but can make a prediction about what the future might look like. We need visionary scientists, not just kind of somebody who knows the tactics of it, but can actually inform us about what the world will look like. And we will cement that in a recommendation that calls for the establishment of an international panel of scientific experts on AI. But scientific expertise doesn't, as we've talked about so many times, get us to people-oriented outcomes all by itself. And so the second part was, well, how do we make sure there's international and global capacity on these issues? We know there are some countries that, by virtue of the size of their economies or their investments, are quite ahead on this conversation, and others that have curiosity and technical knowledge, but don't have access to basic AI resources like compute capacity to be able to train their own models. And so the second line of inquiry was, how do we build global capacity at scale on this? It's led us into what I think of as a startup mindset. How do we create new mechanisms to share compute, to build capacity to create and share data about things that matter for communities? And how do we build a new global infrastructure to actually make that happen? One of the core questions to that is also going to be, who's going to pay for this? This is no longer the question of private companies building a product. It's, what's our shared commitment to a planet where every person in every country has an equal chance of access to AI-enabled gains? And I think one of the responsibilities will be, what do developed, so-called developed nations, primarily in the global north, what's their moral and ethical responsibility to support scientific progress and engagement in the global majority? It's going to be a big one. And the last part of this will be recognizing that this is just me speaking for all of this, I'm not speaking on behalf of the body. This is maybe the first time in a few decades that the world's come together to tangle with a question that intersected between science and policy. The last time might have been around things like nuclear proliferation. The last time that we had to really engage with the question of, what does the technology mean for shared security and for shared aspiration? That was 40 years ago. I might say we've maybe got to dust some of the cobwebs off as we think about new tools, new policies, new fora, new ways to do multilateral science policy at scale. And I think in that, too, I'm really excited, because the people who will drive that conversation, I'll be honest with you, are not exclusively our most distinguished scientists, our Nobel Prize winners, our Turing Award winners. It's going to be a lot of the people who are actually building the tools over the next 2 decades. Like, it is the place where I think youth voices will matter so critically in developing an understanding of what it means for AI to be an international conversation.
And I feel like at LOISF, these 2 weeks is maybe even a microcosm of kind of what that international multilateralism can be. If I think back on kind of my 10 years across the forum, it's actually the people I'm having those conversations with are actually some of the people I sat with in these chairs. So, yeah. We are starting to end towards the end of our fireside chat. So, we have a lot of change makers in this room, and the title of today's talk is kind of Change Makers of the Future. And a lot of them, have ideas of kind of how AI can help achieve and advance loads of different missions, climate mission, healthcare mission, etc. As someone who's actually, traveling the world, having those conversations with people on the ground, with the future innovators, inventors, communities, what are kind of those ideas or prototypes that you can leave us with that really excite you, give you hope, and that kind of we can take back to our own countries?
Yeah, I love that. I think a few things. So one is, in the AI space in particular, recognizing that there's very little that's pure AI anymore. Like, all of it is intersectional. So if you are studying a particular scientific discipline, I think you will find that, and I sort of said this earlier, like, the space is so early in its formation that you have the ability to have outsized impact. When you take the thing you are most curious about, a particular science, a particular discipline, a particular research question, and then you take advantage of your unique position to be right at the forefront of AI science. Because everybody's in the same position. There are very few experts that will come in and answer the question you have. You have the space to define your own inquiry. So what does this mean? Well, I think there's a few things that are just emerging as immediate short-term archetypes. The first we sort of spoke to already, to me, is how do you use AI to create better information and decision-making environments? So whether it's about what's the natural state around you, whether it's figuring out new ways to use geospatial data or data on monitoring what's happening in ocean seas, on kind of urban landscapes, thinking about where you have access to a unique intersection of some knowledge about a domain problem and access to data that you can use AI techniques with to give you a new lens for investigation. That's kind of one big domain of things. I think we're seeing more and more of that. The second is, as you go into your college studies, your graduate programs, where is AI being used to advance foundational scientific methods? So much like I sort of think a lot about things like electron microscopes. When they came out, they totally changed our understanding of the physical nature of many materials because we could really investigate them directly. AI lets us investigate natural phenomena in ways that expand our human capacity. So where are the areas where you will find that in your discipline and you can really bring it to bear? I think that will be quite interesting. And the third is maybe the least technical, but maybe the most socially impactful. When you're doing that work, whether it's on a problem set or in the lab, where are the ways that you can bring the products out of that in a way that changes human behavior, in a way that actually lets people have better access to the things they need to live their lives? So these are questions like work that started as an academic study of looking at radiological scans. And I'll give you one very quick example on this, an organization called Institute Protea that said, we have for the first time validated the idea that you can use AI to look at breast cancer scans and identify whether somebody might be at higher risk or not, obviously to be validated by a human. That wasn't the kind of super interesting insight. The fact that we can do that these days is, okay, all right, we kind of get it. What they realized, though, was that all of the data and models that had been used to train these programs were based on data that was being collected in global north hospitals with really great equipment, with really like sort of established medical practices. They tried to use the algorithms that had been developed in a place like Brazil, where in the particular study set they were doing in rural areas, the clinics didn't have access to the same level of high quality investigative scans. And it turned out the algorithms failed. The data wasn't robust enough to reflect the lived experience of the people in Brazil. And so this amazing scientific inquiry that had been done and this validation of the idea that AI could advance healthcare for all of us really still only worked for people who lived in a particular environment. And so they restarted. They said, we've learned that it's possible. Let's start with the data that we have from the communities we work in, and let's build a more robust model. And they succeeded. And they built an AI system that now you can use almost anywhere in the world, depending on what the local constructs are, that give everybody access to what they had discovered in the lab. What an inspiring mission to hold, to say we will take science and turn it into things that affect hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting piece to kind of start rounding off this conversation, right? That like scientific invention and innovation is not necessarily something that starts from the bench scale altogether, but can also be like a recycled, a renovated version, of something that already exists that's targeted towards particular communities. We kind of have the last question.
Okay.
As we kind of look out, today is closing day, we're all going back to our own countries very soon. We want to close out on a bang. Kind of what are those really practical takeaways, key pieces of advice that you'd leave, the young people in this room, kind of future LIS ambassadors who aspire to lead in those fields of technology and kind of social good combined. And kind of what is maybe this call to action that you can leave us with? If we had to redo this lecture, for example, Vilas, here today in 5 years' time, what is it that we can look back and say, we did this with AI, this was our call to action, we went, we did it, and we won?
Yeah. In 5 years or in 10 years, my hope is I'm in the audience, I'm seeing many of you up on stage, because I think this is really your time to deliver. But let me answer the question with a few things that have even come up in conversations I've had with all of you today. These are somewhat controversial, and that's okay. I think the first thing is, you are all here because you have both a curiosity and a talent for science. I think the most important thing for you to remember is that you're at the beginning of a life and a career where the options you have are going to be defined by you and nobody else. That so much of the world is set up to say, if you are good at science, then there is a thing that you should do next and a thing you should do after that. That, classically, there's all these stereotypes, right? If you come in from certain families, somebody's going to say to you, you have to be a doctor, or you have to be an engineer, or you have to be something else because you were good at science. In my life, the power of science, of engineering, of technical inquiry, has been to give me a way of thinking about the world that I've been able to use in so many disciplines, whether in law, or in building organizations, or in academia. I talk often to young people, and particularly students who are coming out of graduate school programs, about the idea of something called path dependence. And all that means is, so often people tell you, because you took the first 5 steps on a path, you've now set that path for life. And really, why would you do anything other than doing step 6, step 7, step 8 for the rest of your life? I think it's a terrible way to view the world. I think the things that can be incredibly powerful are to recognize that the walk that you have is yours to guide, that you can go and become amazing in a particular discipline, but that doesn't define who you will be on that day, or in 5 years, or in 10 years after that. That, in fact, when you live a life where curiosity is a driving value, where you build these skills because you go so deep into a scientific inquiry or anything, really, that when you're able to step out of that and say, what have I learned? It's just as important to remember who you've become because of it, and to say, who do I want to become next? That's my closing comment to you, and my call to action is, I love science with every fiber of my being. But science doesn't define me. I define my journey, and I'll ask you to do the same. For me, that journey has been one where we take the very best of human innovation and we tie it to a moral compass about what the world could look like. And for me, that journey has been finding and supporting and equipping incredible people who can do that at scale to enable them to create the world that I so selfishly want. A world where we are inspired and creative and we feel agency, where we take the things that we've learned and the people that we are and we work together to create a better future. I think that's my request and call to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I feel like that really sets the stage for opening this up to
Amazing.
you. Q&A. You have one of the best scientists, policymakers, human rights lawyers, philanthropists here with you today. Ask away. And in typical LIYSF fashion, if you can call out your name and your country as well. I think the microphones are through the hall. Right there at the back. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Callum from Guernsey, and you spoke about the effect of incentives on data made available in many different sectors of science, especially, and the effect therein. I was wondering if you could share your views towards ensuring that the incentives are present to democratize the development of AI, ensuring it has the innumerable benefits you mentioned to us.
Amazing. I'm super delighted to. And was it Alan? I'm sorry, Callum?
Callum.
Callum. A pleasure. I have to say, I looked as I was coming into this room to where everybody was from. I was very delighted to say that I'd been to many, if not nearly all of the countries that are represented in the room, but I have to tell you, I have not yet been to Guernsey. And so someday I hope to come. And when I do, hopefully we'll be able to meet up. So thank you for asking the question. You asked a question about incentives, and as we have these questions, feel free to go as technical as you like. I'm happy to get into the science or stay at the policy level. But really the challenge around incentives is probably one of the most critical ones, because it directs where and how we spend our time individually and as a society. And it's not to say that the incentives that we have today are bad. It's just that they're very much in one dominant frame of what do we look at? Well, we look at, in a commercial context, the things that will lead us to purpose, to profit instead of purpose. But I think we can change that. I'll give you an example. Around this question of data and representative data, why don't we have better access to data sets? It's actually a very simple problem. We don't have access to data because we've never asked somebody to go and collect it. How do we actually make that happen? Well, you take it, and as an engineer, I often look at social problems through the same lens I look at scientific ones. I like to break them down into their component parts. I like to understand inputs, I like to understand obstacles, I like to understand challenges, I like to hypothesize about pathways forward, and then design and execute them. To me, this is a question about, one, how do we actually name those lacuna, those vacuums in the data sets that we have that represent the world? Well, that's a starting point that involves a social conversation and a scientific one. It's a literature review meets a focus group and discussion with people and say, where do you feel not yet represented? The second is understand what it takes to actually address that problem. For me, that's always a combination of resources, sometimes clearly just money, but often it's also about thinking about the behavioral infrastructure necessary. If we went out and said, we want you to collect data, but we haven't done the work to say, once you've collected it, here's a way in which you can pull it into a global data infrastructure where you can continue to see how it's used, where you can have a feedback loop, where you can actually benefit from other people's data in the same way that you contribute yours. It leads us to a conversation about data governance, right? Which again is a topic that computer scientists, along with policymakers, are really in the middle of now. How do we build new models for data sharing that allows people to participate in its economic value? From there, we get to the tactical. Okay, if we figured out what the resources are that are needed and we know what we want to collect, how do we build social institutions that curate and monitor and advance this work while we also build a talent pool of people who have the technical skills to be able to deliver it? How do we partner with universities and academic institutions and companies to say this is something your people need to be working on? And then how do we ensure that we're building kind of movements around that that operate at scale? I think you take all of that and you package it together and you try it as an experiment. And you learn a whole lot, and then you see all the places you failed, and then you go back and you do it again. And that, to me, is the mechanism by which you shift incentives. It's not, let's just put up a new policy or make a new statement about what the world should look like. It's a highly tactical approach that says, figure out where you want to get to, and then build a pathway to get there.
Scientific experimentation method.
Absolutely.
Classic. Okay, right up here at the front.
Hello, my name is Salah from Oman. As a applied chemist, I want to ask you, how can we hop between natural science, like physics and chemistry and biology, that kind of complex type of science, and AI? That's my question.
I'm sorry, what's the, just give me a little bit more. So how do we
connect between
Yeah,
AI
sure.
and natural science?
It's a great question. I think we're already seeing it happen in really foundational ways. So one of the initiatives that's happening now globally is the creation of supercompute infrastructure that can be accessible to labs that are doing foundational science. Now, many of the leading kind of hard science practices have been using AI for a long time. This isn't particularly new, right? From data retrieval and curation and developing analytics that sit on top of it, all the way through to predictive models, this has been happening for at least 2 decades and maybe even a little bit longer. What hasn't happened, though, is the idea of a convergence between using some of those tools, because if I'm a quantum physicist, I design my own model and I use it in my research and I published on it, to a convergence of saying, as a discipline, we need to build common kind of models, access, and resources around the use of AI. And that's what we're seeing a lot of now. Across foundational science, the creation of really robust data-driven models that give us kind of baseline approaches to scientific methods and research. Which means that if you're a postdoc studying, I don't know why I'm on a physics bent today, if you're studying evolutionary biology, or let's say you're studying genetics, you have access now to a bunch of work that other people have done that you can now build on top of, instead of saying, I have to start from scratch. 15 years ago, a lot of my friends would go and get a degree in computer science and a degree in neuroscience, or a degree in anything, meteorology, or in whatever else. And they would say, I need to do this because I need to understand how to build my own AI tools so I can do my scientific research. That shouldn't be a requirement anymore. You should be able to concentrate on your field and study of discipline with enough contextualization around computer science, but know that when you need to use a model that lets you predict the temperature outcomes of a particular complicated reaction, somebody has created that model and made it a public utility so that you can go and use it and advance it in your research. This is kind of where the field is now, and I see this across academic institutions is, let's make sure that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, if you know this term, and that AI is a big part of that infrastructure we have to use in our scientific inquiry. Thank you. Let's see about a little gender diversity as well.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to look up and around.
I think I see one over here, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
sure. I mean, go ahead.
The white, please. I think about 4 rows back. Yes, you. You. I'm pointing at you and you're looking over your shoulder. Yes, please. Can we get a microphone up here? Right
Just
here.
Here? 4th row. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Awesome from Spain. And this morning in the forum we have spoken about geoengineering and Mars colonization. And basically the common topic of our debates was what the potential risks of these scientific discoveries or technologies were. And so if it was worth it continuing down the path of investigating these things. And so I think this is a topic that also comes up with AI, because there are very bad potential consequences. And so my question is, can a discovery be inherently bad? And should we maybe stop researching a certain thing just because we fear the consequences? Thank you.
It's a very good question and a very deep one. Here's the way I think about it. I segment that question into 2 pieces. One is, what do we do as a matter of discovery to understand the fundamental and foundational pieces of science? And there's a second part, which is, what do we do with that knowledge, and what do we go off and build? Today's tech world, that isn't really led by scientists, sometimes is, often takes those 2 things and puts them together. And I think you've probably heard this, like the question wasn't whether we could build something, it's whether we should build something. Too often we spend our time just saying, well, if we can build it, we should go and do it, right? And it's a problem. It allows me to answer your question in a nuanced way. I will never say that we should stop researching something, that we should stop trying to understand how the world works. It is that at the core of what I think makes us human is our curiosity and our ability to understand how and why things happen. And to say that we would limit that in some way, I think is really deeply problematic. But, there's always a but, right? Then there's a second layer to that, which is the hubris by which we sometimes take what we have learned about how the world works and say, I will go and build a thing that can do very bad things for humanity. That's our choice to make. And it's not the choice of an individual, it needs to be a collective choice. Now, we've dealt with this before. AI is not the first time that we've said, oh my gosh, we might create something that will really risk humanity's potential future. We've done this, unfortunately, many times over the last century, right? From our fundamental studies into nuclear physics that obviously led to the bomb, but led to amazing technological advances, to maybe more recently kind of genomic research, cloning, and bioethics, right? I don't think anybody would say we shouldn't have gone and learned about the structure of DNA because it might have led to a terrible world where some rogue agent is designing, bioweapons. Instead, I think what we would all say is we have to have done the research, and then we have to be smart about how we create safeguards and guidance and controls, and hopefully we educate scientists, but also people at large to say, this is not a potential and allowable use for this technology, and if you do it, we have legal mechanisms and social mechanisms to stop you from doing it. The idea that we live in a world where a few, I'm now going to be somewhat controversial, like the megalomaniacal Lex Luthor-like billionaires can go off and say, we're going to build technologies because we want to, and don't feel like they're responsible to the rest of us, that's not a world in which science prevails. And it actually isn't a scientific question at all. It's a political one. So that's my somewhat long, nuanced answer to your question.
Okay. Feel free.
No,
there
please.
are some up in the back as well. So yeah, let's go up to the room, the person in the middle over there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Neil from France. How can you use AI to solve the problems faced by people with disabilities?
It's a wonderful question. Thank you. The question, if you didn't hear it, was how do we use AI to address disabilities and create new sort of frames? So I'll give you a scientific answer and then I'll give you a social one. I think you're probably sensing this. Like on the scientific side, we're seeing such incredible advances in addressing the foundational kind of health and science of disabilities. Whether it's things like understanding how to integrate technological components into the neural landscape so that we can come up with synthetic vision, advancing hearing, kind of like those foundational pieces of what physical disabilities in particular might need as technical solutions. And I think that field is incredible. We are going to see so much advancement over just the next 5 years in bionic material, things like prosthetics, things like basic health issues that can be supported. And AI plays such a key role in that, both in the discovery of the problem, in the design of the solution, and maybe embedded in the solution itself. The second part is a little bit naughtier, naughty, K-N-O-T, right? Which is when we feel like we now have the abilities to investigate some of these challenges, how are we making sure that we're centering dignity and identity for individuals who experience disabilities to make sure that this isn't just a, hey, we found a solution that you now have to use, want to use, whatever it is, that we actually enable the community to step forward and say, this is how we want to think about using these tools to advance our interests. And that is not a scientific problem. It, again, as so much of our conversation has been, is at the intersection of what science enables, but what our human and moral values should really allow for a superstructure for. Thank you.
Okay, let's go over to the right of the room.
I love this crowd and the curiosity. There's so many hands. It's amazing.
Do you want to go ahead?
No,
Pick a
please,
question?
keep going.
Okay, like right at the back. Yeah.
Thank you. Eric from China. Thank you. That must be my last question in LOSF 2024, so thank you very much. So my question is, so we are seeing a lot of like what we call the AI big models with broad coverage, for example, the ChatGPT. And where there are a lot of small companies in China, they are more focused on the AI models for a specific area, for example, writing, academics, or something like that. So do you think that the current AI large model development should pay more attention to the broadness or pay more attention to the depth in a specific area? Thank you.
It's a fantastic question and a very technical one. Oop. Chair's falling over. Can you hear me? Microphone's on? Okay, great. It's a really good question. So to set the scene for our entire community here, so large language models, as you all know, they thrive on being as big as possible and as sophisticated as possible and require months of training and lots of power and all the other things. The emergence now of a new form of this structure, which is smaller portable models that are actually quite flexible, that aren't trained on the very large data sets, or when they're trained on the large data sets, are condensed down to essentially give you smaller parameter models, are becoming kind of a new innovation in the space. I think your question's very good. Do we need both? Absolutely yes. Do we understand what the use cases are for both? Not yet. And one of the things I'm particularly interested in is how we build smaller and smaller models that can address specific use cases, but because they're much smaller, can also run in much more sustainable ways. Smaller energy inputs, but also smaller compute infrastructure, so that you don't need to run massive server farms to run them. I think we are still in such the early days of the scientific exploration that we don't yet know the answer to something that I'm deeply compelled by, which is, can we make the model small enough to actually sit on edge devices? So much of the large language model infrastructure requires us to have really centralized infrastructure and server farms, but also in the companies that represent them. You might be familiar with things like open source models, which can run kind of outside of these server farms. But generally speaking, it's not yet possible to train these models of complexity without having access to the compute resources. One of the questions is, over the next 5 to 10 years, could we actually see a transformation where we can train these smaller models just using desktop PCs, or maybe a slightly advanced version of that, some of the crypto infrastructure that's out there? If we could, 3 amazing things happen. First, it means that you no longer have to rely on the entities that own that compute infrastructure, which means communities can actually own much more of the training cases. The second, I think, goes directly to your question, which is you could actually build these models in ways that are so specifically tuned to a particular use case that they're incredibly efficient. They're fast enough that you can integrate them into consumer behavior. They're robust enough that you can use them to do exploration in a particular space, but they're not extraneously large. And the third is something that we've talked about already. We're deeply concerned about environmental sustainability of AI. And it's not just about training models, it's even about the usage of them, something that we call inference cost. What does it actually take to, when you put a line of query into an LLM and somewhere a processor draws a bunch of power to be able to answer it, that's still an incredibly high amount of per unit per usage resource. Small models, I think, might give us a path to really reduce that in a way that increases the global sustainability function of AI. Really good question.
Okay, yeah, at the back over there.
Hello, my name is Clemson from Jamaica. So the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, it's a group of change makers and visionaries and optimists and such. How would I join if I wanted to be one?
I love it. It's a great question. Thank you, Clemson, right? It's a great question. And here's, I think, what I will say is, one, we are one institution. There are many. I think the idea that really smart, engaged, curious people should be thinking about how they expand their careers to actually consider civil society, foundations, philanthropy is exactly the right one. The question to the how is always an easy one, right? Go and get a tactical skill set. We've talked about that. Break away from the path that you are expected to take. Say you want to fix the world in some meaningful way that you have a particular competency on, and then go and talk to the people in the space because you will be welcomed with open arms. For so long, civil society, the people who, I've used this line before, but I'll share it with you. If we think that the people who are supposed to fix the world's problems, the people who are responsible for them are often people who lead nonprofits or civil society. They're the ones that are the front line people who respond when there's a hurricane or a disaster. They're the people who are figuring out how to get healthcare to communities. They're the people who are trying to address climate change. They're often not the ones who are as close to the solutions as they are the problems. It means they understand what's happening in the world and how they might fix it, but they're not necessarily the ones who have had the same kind of training on how to build a product or how to engage in a scientific inquiry. If we could take those communities and bring them together and actually turn them into one, people who are close to problems and close to solutions, they would be so much more effective at changing the world. You could all individually, collectively be a part of that process.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions.
Okay.
You wanna pick anyone?
No, please go ahead. But
Okay. The girl at the back. Blonde. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Tilde Lee and I'm from Sweden. And my question kind of adds up on another one about the dangers of AI. And you mentioned that we should be careful, right? And to know that we shouldn't misuse this power and knowledge that we have. And you said that one option is to regulate, to keep track of what is being done. How are we supposed to do that? Since everyone kind of has that power now. Thank you.
It's a great question. So regulate's a complex word, and maybe it deserves an answer much longer than I can give you from stage. But let me say a couple of things about it. The first is, I actually don't go to regulation as the first answer. At some point, we do need to regulate. I actually start from a conception of something much more basic, which is we can't actually do anything about this until we know what we're talking about. It's a basic, broad-based digital literacy. It means that whether you're a scientist or not a scientist, we need to create the mechanisms for you to learn enough about this topic to actually be educated on the basics of what AI is, to understand what the risks might be, and to have an opinion. And that's not just for policymakers, it's for every single person in an informed society to be able to do. That's the starting point. If we had that, then I think very quickly we'd get to a place where we could have a conversation and say, you know what are the things that we're worried about that aren't just guided by headlines or by like political manipulation, but because we think they are real and foundational risks or challenges? What I've seen happen when we do this well is the vulnerabilities that people come up with are very rarely about the AI taking over, and much more about the ways that AI is creating disparate effects, that some communities are being advantaged and others are being disadvantaged by. And that naturally leads to a question about what should we regulate? How do we actually build social policy in a way that governs the use of these technologies and prevents some of those harms? Then you get to the question of who does that. And I think I just have 2 very quick thoughts for you. I know we're coming to the end of our time. One is governments necessarily need to play a role, but it can't just be governments. It has to be a combination of technologists, of governments, and of civil society coming together to agree on standards and rules and regulations. And the second thing I will say is we're learning that that is really not going to work if every country decides to do it their own way. Because of the cross-border nature of data and AI, we do need some infrastructure for international cooperation. I look around the world today and I realize it's about as hard as it's ever been to actually say, let's forge an international consensus really on anything, but particularly on AI, right, where everybody's excited about it. But that needs to be a focus and it needs to be something we work on, is at least to say, if there are 190 plus countries in the world, how do we at least come up with some common values and principles that can guide regulation in every country so that we're not just have 190 plus places doing their own thing? So, sorry, that's an unsatisfying and short answer, but it's a very good and complex question we can explore further.
Very good. Okay, we have our last question. Yeah, just over here.
Do you want to take two together, and then we'll
okay,
try
actually,
to close
yes,
out on that?
Let's do that. You want to pick the second
Get
one?
as many voices. No, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've had two gentlemen here. I don't know. Do you want to combine your question, maybe?
Wait, do you know each other? Yeah. Are you from the same place?
No, he's from London, I'm from Australia.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, go ahead. You can both ask yours and we'll try to mix them together.
Yeah, let's throw this together.
Questions, what's a week in your life like?
What's your name? And
Oliver from England.
What's your name? Oliver?
Oliver.
Okay, great. And yours?
I'm Jono from Australia. G'day. I was going to ask how much value you put on a formal education. So after high school, going to university, getting your undergrad, getting your master's, getting your PhD, in an age where information's so readily available, how much importance do you put on going to a proper institution versus just getting everything online and through AI?
They're both really good questions. I'll take them in sequence.
I know we had a question over there,
yeah, sure.
but we bounced to collect the questions. So yeah, let's just not miss that one.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah, I think you had your hand up, right? Yeah. Yeah, the microphone's just behind you.
Hi, I'm Annie from New Zealand. And my question was, you sort of touched on it a little bit before when you said about how the data sets that were trained on the information that was available, which means some communities, such as like more rural communities, didn't necessarily have the same representation in those data sets. My question was sort of, what issues do you see coming from that lack of knowledge around more indigenous or rural communities that haven't been included within those data sets? And what about when those communities don't actually want AI within them? Because there are some places that are perfectly happy to just exist as they are in the ways that they have. They don't see a necessity for AI to exist within them.
Absolutely. It's a really good question. So let me take them kind of in reverse order. I think foundational to your question is probably one of the most important things we've talked about today, which is the idea of, I want to live in a world where every individual in every community has the agency to make their own choices. The choices they make are up to them, but I never want to feel like they are foreclosed from being able to do something because they're not resourced, equipped, they don't have proximity to, or they're intentionally excluded from, right? So let's start there as the starting point. Like really, at the end of the day, this is about self-determination and power. The second part of your question is what happens when you're not represented in these data sets, as I understood the question. And unfortunately, we see it everywhere and all the time in really deeply pernicious ways. And it's not just about rural or indigenous communities that I have a great passion for and work with, but even in like the very commercial things that we all do. We looked at some research recently that said the average person in a global north country is interacting with an AI-driven system at least 70 times a day. These are everything from the ways your traffic lights work to obviously the more obvious ones like the voice assistant on your phone, but to more pernicious things like how financial institutions are making decisions about how risk-worthy you are and figuring out whether or not you can go and make that transaction at the store. Those algorithms that are driving many of those decisions that these institutions are making are based on data that isn't representative of everyone, which means if you're not in the original data set, you don't have a place in how that algorithm thinks about whether to consider you risky or not. It leads to disparate effects across criminal justice systems, across financial systems, across all kinds of risk scoring systems. And that's just at the individual level. And you expand that out to the community level and the geographic and the indigenous level, and there are entire, communities of, I think, billions of people in aggregate who just aren't represented all in the data. So and they will feel the consequences of that when they try to engage with the dominant system. We've got to be able to address that. I'll come to your question. So I think I had two here. One was like, what's my week like? And I'm sorry, remind me again?
How much value do you...
Yeah, traditional education, right. So I will tell you, I have spent a lot of my life in traditional education. I have never really done it because I cared about the certificate. I've done it because for me, it's an amazing place to do what I love to do more than anything else, which is ask curious questions. There's a lot to the answer that I want to give you, and I know we don't have a ton of time, but let me say a couple of things. One is, I think we live in a world where that like baseline value of a diploma is receding and receding fast. That whether it's employers or people who are engaged in scientific inquiry, I think people more and more are realizing they need to assess and evaluate your skills and your capacity rather than the degree that you have. And I'm seeing it even in the way that I hire people is I care not very much about where you went to school or even what your degree or your field is. I care a lot about what you're able to tell me when we sit down for a conversation about how you think about a problem and how you think about possible solutions, about what the depth of your knowledge is that you can bring. But the other thing I'll also say to you is I think the four-year university, which has been the dominant paradigm, is itself, I think, becoming somewhat, I don't want to say obsolete, that's too strong of a word, but is moving into a field where people are realizing there are other pathways, whether it's technical training or self-directed study. The answer to your question really at the end of the day is how do you show curiosity about the world? And where do you find the resources that let you answer the questions you care most about? No part of this should be directed by somebody else who tells you what they will teach you. It should be directed by what you want to learn. And I'll come to your question, which is a fun one. What does my week look like? And I wish I had any kind of answer for you. Every week is incredibly dynamic and shifts, but I'll give you a few little vignettes. In my ideal week, I get to do like a whole handful of things, from sitting down with researchers who are at the absolute frontiers of a lot of the things we've talked about, traditional scientific domains using AI, to hear from them what their research is teaching us and to think about how we build new resource structures for them. At places like the National Science Foundation or with Nobel laureates or with emerging scientists who are just doing really cool things. I get to spend another part of my week with social change makers who are addressing these problems that we've talked about at length today. But every time I do, I learn something new about a facet of the human experience, whether it's understanding the possibilities of African fly larvae to change nutritional structures and entire food systems, or it's understanding how indigenous knowledge about the preservation of local ecology can change the way we think about climate resilience at scale in an AI and data-driven context. So I get to do a lot of that. I get to do a little bit of engagement with the world. I like to explain AI. I like to hear from people what their questions are and talk about it. I do a fair bit of writing. I do a fair bit of like media stuff. I run an organization, so I'm also a functional CEO, and I have a team that we run programs all across the world. And through it all, I get to find a lot of joy just being with people who believe this core thing, and this is where we'll end. And I know I've said it several times, but I have to keep coming back to it. I am just so impressed by all of you in the conversations I've had. I love your curiosity, but more than anything else, I love your belief that if we could become amazing scientists, if we could become amazing engineers, if we could learn how to do these tactical things well, but we could do them in a way that brought our understanding of our lives, our communities, our experiences, if we could do them with empathy and kindness and with optimism, what a world we could create. Thank you all so much for this time today. And thank you so much. Amazing. Thank you all.
I am actually going to ask one of our students here, Rihanna Leons from Australia, to come up and actually tell you in her own words what a great lecture this has been and what a phenomenal way it has been to end LIYSF. Thank you, Vilas. Over to you.
Dear Vilas Dhar, we began this forum 2 weeks ago with a debate about the impacts and implications of generative AI, not just on science, but also on society. During this debate, the ethics of AI was always an underlying topic in every argument raised by our participants. This afternoon, you flipped the typical portrayal of AI and presented us with questions that have opened our minds and many other applications to many other applications of this technology for the future and enabling scientific development without replacing human input, all while perfectly encapsulating the theme of this year's forum, Science Across Borders. You painted a picture of a world where we use AI to aid us in creating a better world, being used as a tool to help us find a solution instead of being the solution. You said that you are not hopeful for technology, but instead for people. And myself and many others in this room here today could not agree more with that statement. You spoke on the need for a strong understanding of the way in which AI is trained to ensure that it remains fair, equal, and sustainable, and perfectly represents every single person in this room, in the world, and in society. You have changed mine and many other people's perspectives on AI and the direction in which it will evolve into the future. On behalf of all of us here at LIYSF today, thank you for inspiring us with your ideas of the future and for reminding everyone in this room and online that we will be the ones to reshape the future and the world. Thank you.